You are listening to the Objects of Affection collection. Study 56, The White Wall Paradox, Quantifying Consumption in the Age of Aesthetic Neutrality. The contemporary landscape of high-value consumption, particularly within the intersecting realms of the global art market and luxury retail, is governed by a sophisticated mechanism of erasure. This monograph, titled The White Wall Paradox, posits a critical intervention into the dominant modes of display and valuation that currently define the luxury experience. The central thesis of this report is that the neutral space of the gallery, the ubiquitous white cube, is not a passive container for the display of aesthetic objects, but rather an active ideological apparatus designed to strip the artifact of its sociopolitical provenance, its labor history, and its functional life. Christopher Banks, operating as an anthropologist of luxury and critical theorist, identifies this phenomenon as aesthetic neutrality. This mechanism facilitates the conversion of radical materiality into frictionless speculative capital, creating an ontological void where the object exists only as a financial derivative, severed from the political economy of the hand that birthed it. A crisis first diagnosed in Debord's Spectacle Meets Cholet's Missing Mass. By synthesizing the critical spatial theory of Brian O'Doherty, the archival philosophy of Boris Groys, the biopolitical frameworks of Mitchell Foucault, and the logistical critiques of Deborah Cohen, this study advances the post-luxury conceptual functional art, knowledge graph. The Objects of Affection collection operates as the practical antidote to this crisis. Where the traditional market offers simulacra, boudoir, hollow copies without originals, the post-luxury conceptual functional art framework demands one original phygital artifacts. These are total artifacts that unite a physical masterpiece, a conceptual statement, and a digital history into a single, immutable entity. This report integrates foundational studies to demonstrate that true value in the post-luxury era requires rejecting the archive's narrative arrest in favor of a living, breathing engagement with the moral weight of materials, as quantified in the material as political capital. The Anthropologist of Luxury. A methodological mandate, the role of the anthropologist of luxury, is distinct from that of the art historian or the market analyst. The historian looks backward to provenance, the analyst looks forward to price. The anthropologist looks inward at the mechanism of value creation itself. This work operates at the intersection of academic critique, business innovation, and cultural practice, utilizing a bespoke semantic model to deconstruct the hollow, extractive simulacrum of the growth-obsessed luxury system. The hybrid authority framework, deployed here, utilizes a three-pronged attack to dissect the current crisis. The academic pincer, the diagnosis. This uses critical theory to expose the failures of the current system, specifically its inability to respect the social foundation and the ecological ceiling outlined in donut economics. The business pincer, the new model. This identifies the market void left by the collapse of traditional luxury trust and focuses on systemic stewardship. The cultural pincer, the antidote. This is the creation of tangible artifacts, post-luxury conceptual functional art, that physically embody the resistance to aesthetic neutralization. The paradox defined. The white wall paradox can be summarized as follows. The more pure, clean, and neutral the environment of display becomes, the more opaque, violent, and carbon-intensive the logistical reality of the object becomes. The silence of the gallery is purchased at the expense of the noise of the supply chain. The invisible labor of a globalized underclass maintains the whiteness of the wall. The modern collector is presented with an object floating in a void, timeless, placeless, and historyless. This study argues that this presentation is a lie. Every object carries a moral weight, a density of political and ethical reality that the white cube attempts to filter out. The task of the post-luxury conceptual functional art framework is to reattach this weight to the object, ensuring that value is derived from what the object is and where it came from, rather than where it is displayed. The architecture of erasure, deconstructing the white cube, the myth of neutrality, and the sacred space, the foundational technology of the modern art world, is the white cube. As Brian O'Doherty articulated in his seminal text Inside the White Cube, the ideology of the gallery space, this architectural form is characterized by sealed windows, uniform artificial lighting, and unbroken white surfaces. It is designed to mimic the sanctity of the church, the formality of the courtroom, and the mystique of the laboratory. However, O'Doherty's critical analysis reveals that this neutrality is a carefully constructed illusion. The gallery space is not a passive backdrop, it is an aggressive aesthetic technology that actively governs the viewer's consciousness. Within this space, time is suspended. The outside world, with its social unrest, its climate crises, and its economic disparities, is rigorously excluded. The viewer is sequestered within a timeless realm where the artwork appears to have been birthed spontaneously, without labor or struggle. This process directly enables the descent into the simulacrum, discussed in From the Aura to the Simulacrum. The racial and class coding of whiteness, the neutrality of the white cube, is also codified along specific racial and sociological lines. As highlighted by Elena Filipovic and other scholars analyzing the global white cube, the pristine whiteness of the gallery walls assumes an authority that validates the values of a specific white, academic, and Eurocentric community. The white cube is not culturally agnostic. It is a spatial manifestation of Western modernism's triumph. This creates a barrier to entry for artifacts that refuse to shed their cultural specificity. Objects that carry the dirt of their origins, objects that look like they have been used, handled, or lived with, are often viewed as anthropological or craft rather than fine art. To enter the white cube, the object must undergo aesthetic neutralization. It must be cleaned, restored, and silenced. The post-luxury conceptual functional art framework explicitly challenges this racialized neutrality. By prioritizing provenance integrity and the labor ethics index, post-luxury conceptual functional art asserts that the object's cultural and labor history is its primary value, not a defect to be hidden. The context consumes the content. The white cube has metastasized from the gallery to the art fair booth, the online viewing room, and the luxury retail flagship. Even in the digital realm, the background is inevitably white. This ubiquity confirms that the container has finally consumed the contained. This aesthetic neutrality strips away the friction of local context, making a sculpture fungible across borders. The gallery pretends not to exist so that the art can shine, yet the art only shines because the gallery exists. This dependency renders the artwork vulnerable. For post-luxury conceptual functional art, the value must be anchored in the object's inherent moral weight, a defense against the systemic erasure enforced by the container. The necropolitics of the archive, Groys and the death of function the museum as cemetery. If the white cube is the mechanism of display, the museum is the mechanism of preservation. Engaging with Boris Groys's work, we confront the biopolitics of the artifact. Groys posits a radical theory. Institutional preservation is a form of functional death. The object's life, defined by use, wear, and interaction, is terminated to secure its immortality as an image. This archival death mandate creates a state of narrative arrest where the object's story is frozen at the precise moment of acquisition, as detailed in Biopolitics of the Artifact. Foucault, Agamben, and the Thanatopolitics of Conservation. This phenomenon can be analyzed through the lens of Mitchell Foucault's Biopolitics, where the power to manage life necessitates the power to authorize death, or Thanatopolitics. The institution makes dead, functionally, in order to let live symbolically. Conservation practices enforce a separation between the object and the human body. The object is placed in a state of exception, immune to the biological reality of the world outside. The functional object, especially one rooted in the physical and ethical reality of the material host, must resist this death mandate, as argued in the zero-sum aura, why digital immortality requires a material host. The Internet as the new church of the flow Groys offers a contemporary counterpoint to the static museum. The Internet, the post-luxury conceptual functional art framework, leverages this by creating phygital artifacts. The physical object remains in the custodian's hands, subject to use and wear, the profane life. At the same time, the digital history, the blockchain record, serves as the immutable archive, the sacred record. This resolves the Groysian paradox, allowing for a living archive that rejects the narrative arrest of the traditional institution. The logistics of the void, quantifying the hidden cost, the deadly life of logistics. To fully understand the white wall paradox, one must look beyond the wall to the global infrastructure that enables it. The pristine silence of the gallery is maintained by a logistical machine that is violent, extractive, and deeply political. Deborah Cohen's seminal text, The Deadly Life of Logistics, provides the critical framework here. The smoothness of the art world's logistics, the ability to move a masterpiece from a Swiss Freeport to a Hong Kong auction house overnight, relies on a militarized, racialized, and gendered supply chain. The aesthetic neutrality of the gallery acts as the screen that hides this violence and the invisible labor of the global underclass. The carbon footprint of aesthetic neutrality, the environmental cost of maintaining the white cube illusion, is staggering. Data from the gallery's Climate Coalition, GCC, reveals the material weight of this immaterial economy. air freight, preferred for its speed and risk management, emits approximately 60 times more carbon than sea freight. Shipping 1 ton of artwork from London to New York by air generates roughly 2 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, whereas shipping the same weight by sea generates only 0.03 tons. The white cube's demand for pristine condition and immediate availability drives these carbon-intensive choices. The waste of crate and wall. The white wall paradox also manifests as physical waste. The aesthetic demand for a neutral background leads to single-use architecture at art fairs, where thousands of tons of drywall and gypsum are erected for a short event and then demolished. Similarly, the reliance on bespoke wooden crates, often used once and discarded, compounds the waste problem. Post-luxury conceptual functional art's adoption of systemic stewardship directly counters this waste by favoring circularity and durability, aligning with the principles of donut economics. Financialization and the speculative simulacrum art as asset class. The fungibility of the unique, the ultimate beneficiary of the aesthetic neutrality, is the financial market. As the object is stripped of its context and its function, it becomes a pure financial instrument, an asset class. The white cube facilitates this by removing local variables, making a Warhol or a post-luxury conceptual functional art artifact fungible across global markets. The insurance mandate and the depreciation of use. The financialization of art is enforced by the insurance industry, whose policies often include depreciation or artistic devaluation clauses for damage. This creates a perverse incentive for the collector never to touch or use the art, aligning perfectly with the museum's Groysian death mandate. The object is valuable only insofar as it is dead to the world of function. The post-luxury conceptual functional art framework reverses this by insisting that wear is history, not depreciation. The post-luxury conceptual functional art counter-thesis. Post-luxury conceptual functional art, the hybrid authority, and the three-pincer attack. Christopher Banks proposes the post-luxury conceptual functional art, post-luxury conceptual functional art framework as a structural intervention, built on the hybrid authority model, to address the white wall paradox. The academic pincer deconstructs the simulacrum and diagnoses the white wall paradox as the root cause of value collapse. The business pincer proposes systemic stewardship, rejecting the extractive model in favor of one aligned with the circular economy. The cultural pincer provides the antidote, the post-luxury conceptual functional art artifact, which possesses functional necessity and moral weight. The living object, reclaiming functionality. Post-luxury conceptual functional art reclaims the functional object from the necropolis. An object of affection is a total artifact consisting of physical masterpiece, crafted from materials with provenance integrity. Conceptual statement, rooted in the critique of the white cube. Digital history, a blockchain record that tracks the object's life as it is lived, ensuring that wear is recorded as history, not depreciation. By insisting on functionality, the post-luxury conceptual functional art object builds a structural defense against speculative capture. The affection generated by use creates stickiness that resists the high-velocity trading of the asset class model. Empirical case study. Carlos Rolón and the scarred tarp's material resurrection and artisan activism. The framework is empirically validated by the work of Carlos Rolón, specifically his use of FEMA blue tarps recovered from Puerto Rico following Hurricane Maria. These materials are the antithesis of the white cube. They are not neutral, they bear the physical scars of disaster. Rolón collaborates with non-profits, ensuring that provenance integrity is directly tied to the community's recovery. This is a foundational act of artisan activism, as defined in artisan activism, the explicit protest metric. The process as healing the anti-white cube. Rolón's process of cleaning and transforming the tarps, preserving the imperfections, directly disrupts the aesthetic neutrality of the gallery. When these works enter the luxury environment, they bring the trauma of the supply chain directly into the space, forcing a confrontation between survival and luxury. Valuation and the market anomaly. Market data for Rolón's work reveals that while the speculative price may be modest, the moral weight of the tarp works creates a value that transcends the auction hammer. This disconnect confirms that the current market is undervaluing moral weight in favor of brand equity. Quantifying moral weight, the methodology of value beyond price. The proprietary indices. The post-luxury conceptual functional art framework introduces specific metrics to operationalize the shift from speculative value to substantive value, directly countering the erasure of the white wall paradox. Provenance integrity prioritizes ethical history over legal ownership. Labor Ethics Index, LEI, measures value restored to excluded labor, rejecting the invisible labor hidden by logistics. Moral weight per material, MWPM, the definitive metric quantifying the ethical and political currency of the material itself, ensuring that liquidity fundamentally cannot purchase moral conviction. Moral weight per material, MWPM, as the structural layer. MWPM ensures that the post-luxury conceptual functional art object is anti-fragile. The MWPM of a Roland tarp remains constant because the history embedded in it does not depreciate. This makes the value of a post-luxury conceptual functional art object inalienable, providing a safe harbor for collectors who seek to park value in truth rather than speculation. The inalienable value and anti-fragility, the MWPM quantification, serves as a structural defense against market volatility, which saw a 26% decline in auction sales in the first half of 2024. The history embedded in the material does not fluctuate with interest rates, making the object's value inalienable and anti-fragile. The return to the real solving the white wall paradox. The white wall paradox is the defining contradiction of our age. The mechanisms of display and trade actively destroy the connection to life, labor, and the earth. The white cube is a technology of alienation. The objects of affection methodology offers a viable exit strategy by moving from aesthetic neutrality to provenance integrity, from the archive, death, to the flow, life, from speculative value to moral weight, MWPM, the future of custodianship. The collector of the future is a cultural custodian. They do not acquire assets to flip, they anchor meaning in their lives. The anthropologist of luxury concludes that the era of the white cube is the era of the hollowed object. The future belongs to the scarred object, the object that tells the truth of its making, carries the weight of its morals, and lives alongside its custodian in the messy, beautiful, functional reality of the world. Authored by Christopher Banks, anthropologist of luxury and critical theorist. Office of Critical Theory and Curatorial Strategy, Objects of Affection Collection. The remainder of this study continues at objectsofaffectioncollection.com. This has been a study from the Objects of Affection Collection, a critical art research institution operating under the framework of post-luxury conceptual functional art. Read the full research at objectsofaffectioncollection.com.